Hello to you. I've just exited the Mitchell Freeway at Hester Avenue. This is the final stop of the freeway as at October 3, 2020. And today we're going to make the run to Lancelin along Indian Ocean Drive. Should take us about 1 hour. It's about 83 kilometres. We go through a number of different speed zones on the way. It's 13.5 degrees and quite a beautiful morning in Perth. We're turning left here at Wanneroo Road, which turns into Indian Ocean Drive. And there are market gardens on our right throughout this section. There's a lot of tourism south of Perth, and Perth people will often say we're going down south this weekend, but more and more people are starting to discover this northern section, 2 and 3 hours north of Perth, and this is where the Turquoise Coast comes into play. It runs from Guilderton to Green Head and comprises a number of towns on the coast. Laid back towns, great to have a look at, and today I'll talk you through 3 of them as we pass them: Guilderton, Seabird, Ledge Point, and then finally the arrival into Lancelin, which is about halfway up on this journey to Green Head. We've had some good rains over the last couple of months, so what you're going to see here in early October is very green countryside, particularly in the last half of this section of the video. Normally at this time of year it started to dry out a little bit, and at the moment we're 85 kilometres from Lancelin, but being very green, great for the cattle and the local flora, the local animals that abound up here. If you'd have come back in February and do this trip, you'd find this countryside would be yellow and brown, having had a little rain. Let's hope we can do all of this video in one take. I've had a crack at this trip 3 times now, and I was using GoPro gear, which is a pain in the bum. So today I've just used my iPhone and plugged an external mic in, and I think this is going to be a much better alternative. On your right here is a Caltex service station where this gentleman or woman is turning off, and Healy's store That is the last fuel you'll get on Indian Ocean Drive until you get to Gingin Bay, which is about an hour and a half from here, probably a little bit more. Of course, you can turn off and get fuel at a number of the towns on the way, but yeah, that is your final fuel stop. And they make a mean toasted sandwich and have a range of other snacks. You will see along this road these fire danger signs on the left here with a rating, and obviously with lots of green grass and moisture around, it's at the lowest level. This section is 90 kilometres an hour, and we do that for about 15 minutes from the turnoff of the freeway, and then it bumps up to 100 kilometres an hour, and I'll show you where that happens. And often people will talk about if there was an incident that happened in the 90 or the 100 zone, that's what they talk about there. You'll also find a number of these overtaking lanes along this section of the road. There are no dedicated overtaking lanes once you get past Lancelin and get up to Gingin Bay. But these were introduced, not this one in particular, but certainly the ones when we get a bit further on were introduced after a number of fatalities on the road, which gave it a bit of an unfair reputation because the road is fantastic. It's just that there have been some idiots, and of course there's also been some bad luck involved. A lot of people blame the tourists, but there's no evidence to suggest that it's solely tourists who are being involved in these incidents. Many locals as well, and some incidents where just plain bad luck or health conditions have played a part. But I find it to be a very relaxing drive. And now that these overtaking lanes are in place, it has alleviated some of the frustration. Doing this drive at 9 a.m. in the morning, or 9 a.m, it means the same thing, I know. It means we get some shadows across the road. If I were to do this at noon, there'd be no shadows on the road, but I don't think the light is quite as nice. Envisaged when I first decided to do these videos that people like you who are planning on doing the drive or are doing the drive would actually play the video as you go along, and that way you'll get an idea of what's on either side of the road, things that you might consider having a look at, and I hope that that is indeed the way that it's being used. We're now going through the Yanchep National Park, and as with all national parks, you're not allowed to take your dogs into them. You're fine on the road, obviously, but if you get out and go into the park, you'll need to leave your dog somewhere else. But a beautiful section of road here, and there's no other section like this, view-wise, all the way up to, in fact, anywhere north of Perth. It's a really interesting section here with very old trees and a canopy of leafy stuff over the top. I always think this would make a great spot to film a car commercial in. There's even a nice crest here. This section of the road leads to the Yanchep turnoff. Now, Yanchep is a town on the coast. It's really just an outer suburb of Perth. Many years ago used to house the Atlantis Marine Park, which had dolphins and all sorts of other marine animals, but that is long since closed. And there is a tourist drive down there which will eventually get you near the beach, and then you can turn left and head along Marmion Avenue all the way along the coast. So at the turn-off here, the speed limit changes to 70, and there's the Yanchep Beach Road turn-off to our left. Bump back up to 90 k's an hour here. We're 74 kilometres from the town of Lancelin, 166 from Jurien Bay. We've been going 15.4 kilometres from the turn-off at the end of the freeway, that is. To our right at this point, there are a couple of old concrete bunkers that are maybe 150 metres inland. You can't see them from the road from where we are here, but if you're travelling the other direction, just around the corner, you can see them on the hill. And they're photographically quite nice. That's at 18 kilometres from the end of the freeway. "70 kilometres to Lancelin from here." We've been going 19.6. And just up here, the speed limit changes to 100 kilometres an hour. Start of the final 3/4 of this journey today in the 100 km/h zone. Changes here to 4 lanes, 2 either way. Turn off left to Yanchep 2 Rocks on Breakwater Drive. That's often the point where you'll feed back onto this road if there's a detour in that last section of road. There are a number of rest stops along this road. There's one on our right now with a sheltered area to have a bite to eat at a picnic table, a couple of bins. That was where the zone for during COVID, which we're still in, there was a roadblock there where Perth people couldn't go north and people north of Perth couldn't go back to Perth there unless they had a valid reason. And here you see something new, which was only brought in a couple of years ago, if that. These extended line markings in the middle of the road, something like 1 metre wide, and I'll come back to that in a second, because if you turn right here at Military Road, you can get to the Gravity Discovery Centre, which is worth a visit. Effectively, it's a tower that's slanted, so you can walk up to the top and drop stuff off the top and see how gravity works. So back to these lines, they're 1 metre apart and give that little no man's land. Previously, there was just the standard 30 centimetre wide markings, which we still have in some of the sections here, but because of a few accidents on this road, they introduced that measure along with the rumble strip left and right, which, as you can hear there, is an audible warning. And there have been a number of these overtaking lanes introduced because frustration was deemed to be one of the reasons why people made silly decisions that ended up in great damage and sometimes death. Quite a bit of traffic heading north today. It is in the school holidays and there's beautiful weather, and that, well, those two factors tend to be quite powerful in attracting people heading north to the Turquoise Coast and beyond. We have the Indian Ocean out to our left, and those waters are rich with lobster. So a number of the towns that we'll pass today on the Turquoise Coast are home to lobster fishing boats that ply the waters all year round in search of these highly sought after creatures, which go for up to a couple of $100s a kilo in Asia at restaurants. But here in Australia, you're able to buy off the boats when the fishermen are selling, and you'll get them at some pretty darn good rates. And you can head to lancelin.com.au to find out when fishermen are selling them off the back of the boats in that town. Up here on our left is the Wilbinga Grove rest stop, but if you head inland to the beach, there's some great four-wheel driving to be done, but you'll need to be an astute four-wheel driver and be well prepared. as you can easily come to grief. At the moment we are 50 kilometres from Lancelin and about 44 kilometres from the turnoff to Lancelin. 40 kilometres from the turnoff of the freeway. On our right is the Sun City farm. This is a carrot farm, quite a large one. Sells their produce all over Australia and exports them. And on our left is Woodridge, a small semi-rural town, large blocks. There's a St John ambulance substation there. There's also a cafe and a little town hall. And here's the turnoff on the left, King Drive for Woodridge. If you're after a snack, you'd be well served by heading in there. If you're a strawberry lover, at various times of the year you can go and pick your own by turning right here, and it's exceptionally good value. That's the turn off at Croot Place. So as you can see, countryside has just changed. It's opened up a lot now. We have farming country. Just up here on the right is the turn off to Gingin, which is a small inland town, nothing special. Got a nice park though, and a railway line with an old station turned into a little tourist destination there. So this is Gingin Brook, and if you're after a coffee, there's often a coffee van about 200 kilometres down the road, 200 metres I should say down the road, and it's operational for most of the week. Recently I did the drive from Lancelin to the top of the freeway, and I counted the number of signs that I saw facing me on the southbound journey, and I came up with 279 signs, and that doesn't include little things on the side of the road like those posts, those white posts, but any sign that had some sort of traffic or tourist information, not advertising signs. Yeah, it added up to 279. And just on our right here is an all-terrain vehicle track where they have occasional races on dirt. ahead is the Moore River. Now the Moore River at this point is very small, maybe 5 metres up to 20 metres in flood. But there's a bridge across the road here with the Moore River going underneath. And the Moore River ends up in Guilderton. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a second. But if you turn right just here and backtrack 100 metres, there's a nice little camping spot where there's public facilities. You can sit right on the edge of the Moore River. And the other thing about this section of road is just up ahead here is the only fixed speed camera on this road. And I'm sure it does a roaring trade from people who have no idea that it's there. It's just after the Sovereign Hill turnoff, and Sovereign Hill is a semi-rural estate. Nothing to see in there, just large blocks and a peaceful lifestyle. Mini farms. There's a limestone and sand quarry on our left. But there it is, the fixed speed camera to our right. Beware. So the Turquoise Coast officially starts here at Guilderton, about 1 kilometre ahead of us. And Guilderton is a beautiful little town. It's set on a little bit of a hill overlooking the Moore River that empties out into the Indian Ocean. Only on occasions, most of the time, there's a sandbar across it. And this is the turnoff to our left, Guilderton Road, and it's probably 5 to 8 minutes to get into Guilderton from there. But it has a beautiful golf course. It has a lovely country club where you can go and see one of the Fresnel lights from the lighthouse, which is worth a look. It's at the northern end of the town. There's bowling, not 10-pin bowling, I mean lawn bowling, tennis, a nice playground and a skate park. But really the action is down on the beach, where you can often see pelicans, especially if you're fishing. They'll come and try and nick your bait or your fish that you catch. But the river, when it breaks, and it breaks a number of times a year when the water levels get too high for the sandbar to hold it back, it starts off with a trickle of water going out to the ocean, and then a couple of hours later it's this flooded torrent. And if you're any good at surfing, you could try and surf that standing wave, and I've shot a couple of people doing that. But gee, you want to be a good swimmer, because if you get sucked out to sea, and you could get sucked out 100 to 200 metres, you'll want to know what you're doing. So quite dangerous, but a real spectacle. When it happens, you want to be there, but of course it's nature, so it happens when it happens. You just have to be lucky. There's also a lovely caravan park right on the foreshore. There's a great cafe down on the foreshore, and a roadhouse for fuel and snacks. But a picturesque town, small population, but I would highly recommend you go and have a look at that. You can also kayak, and occasionally there is some boat tours that run up the river. On our right here is another semi-rural estate, Redfield Park. second seaside town along the Turquoise Coast is Seabird. There's a turn-off up here to our left. This is the smallest of the towns, and really, apart from the caravan park, which is excellent, even has a pool, there is only a cafe there and a tavern. But the tavern, while it's not terribly modern or spectacular to look at as a building, has the most remarkable views out over the Indian Ocean because it's raised. The turn-off to Seabird is here on our left, and it's not that long a trip down that road to get to Seabird. But the government had to step in a little while back to rescue the town because they'd already lost a road into the ocean, and further erosion was taking more and more land, so they put in a temporary measure of these concrete slabs, which has certainly halted the erosion for the time being. I'm not sure it's a particularly long-term solution, maybe 5 or 10 years, but certainly the property owners were very happy that they did it, and that stopped those properties from falling into the ocean. But of course it means that there is no longer a beach there. That's the trade-off. To our left are some open paddocks which typically run cattle, but in the morning and the late afternoon, and in fact right now there's an emu out there, but in the morning and afternoons, dawn and dusk, you will see almost without fail kangaroos in big numbers. And the funny thing is with them that if you do 105 kilometres an hour past them and they're in a paddock, they won't care one bit. However, if you stop, they will look at you and then bound off back into the bush. They are terrified of that. But often I'll see 30 or 40 out in a paddock early morning or late in the afternoon. And particularly this time of year when there's plenty of feed. At the moment we're 30 kilometres from Lancelin, and we're nearly 60 kilometres from the start of our journey. So it's a total of 90 kilometres. Takes us about an hour. There are signs along this road warning you to beware of emus and kangaroos and echidnas. And if you're ever faced with a big animal like an emu or a kangaroo on the road and you're doing 100 kilometres an hour, do not swerve violently to avoid them, because you'll do more damage than you will if you hit them. And while they will do some damage to the front of your car, it'll be a lot less than a rollover. And a lot of inexperienced drivers do that. They swerve violently and become unstuck. Kangaroos will often sit in the middle of the road after dark, and you will come right up to them. And I've done this a couple of times, and I'll be 5 kilometres, 5 metres from them, and they still won't move. You've got to toot your horn, and they sometimes just gently amble away. But emus are just totally stupid. They're completely unpredictable and panic, and they are big animals. just on the left there is a turnoff, and if you head to the coast you'll find a number of shacks there. That's Breton Bay. These shacks are just made of corrugated iron. I'm not sure, but I believe those shacks are on private property right down on the beach. But it's an interesting glimpse into how these settlements were set up, and when you head north on the Turquoise Coast, particularly up to Wedge and Grey and further north, these are larger shack settlements which the government don't want people on that land because they haven't paid any rent, they haven't bought the land, they've just gone and put up these pretty basic sort of structures without any plumbing. They bring their own water, or they catch water in tanks, and there's no deep sewerage. They just run off septic tanks. But yeah, it's worth a look. It's an interesting, peculiar thing about Western Australia. Rest stop on our left here and one on our right. On our right just here is Bennies Road, Now, I like Bennies Road photographically because it has a canopy of trees covering the road for a good 400 metres. So you would turn right and it goes into dirt, but photographic, it's quite lovely. You can put a subject on the crest, and in the morning the sun rises and gives you that lovely orange, or in fact a couple of times a year you get the sun directly at the end of that road, and occasionally you get the moon coming up, a full moon coming up there, although that's a particularly tricky photo to do, and you need to have a thing like an app like the photographer's ephemeris to work out what days would be ideal to be shooting there. The next town on the ocean is Ledge Point, and Ledge is a smaller town than Lancelin, larger than Seabird or probably Guilderton, and it has a lovely golf course. There's a bowls club and a sporting club where you can dine. They're not open every night, but certainly come the weekends they're open. A beautiful bay for swimming, and because of the strong winds in January and probably December as well, it's a fantastic place to go wind and kite surfing. It's also the starting point of the Lancelin Ocean Classic, a marathon wind surfing event that runs out to Lancelin. And here is the turnoff on our left to Ledge Point. It's also got the Big Four Caravan Park, which is one of the best, and a little bit of rain hitting our windscreen now. There's also a cafe there, and Ledge Point is home to 4 or 5 boats that fish for lobster throughout the year. But there's no jetty. There used to be a little fuel dolphin, which was this little platform where the boats could pull up next to and fuel, but that has since gone. So those boats now have to travel to Lancelin to refuel. There's also a dirt track that runs between Ledge Point and Lancelin, although it's quite narrow and there is foliage on both sides, so you have to be prepared for your car to be scratched if you take that track. You don't need a 4-wheel drive for memory, but it's not that smooth and you are on dirt and gravel. We've travelled 80 kilometres from the end of the freeway, and the turnoff to Lancelin is just up here. Now, Lancelin is the major town in this area on the coast. It has a population of about 700 that swells to a couple of thousand in peak season. Sandboarding is the #1 activity, and you want to get onto the lancelin.com.au website and book your sandboard and take it out on the dunes, and it is a real hoot. Anyone can do it. You can stand up, you can sit down. It is great fun. There's also quad biking. You can book a tour at lancelin.com.au. There's a jetty there where you can fish, and as I mentioned earlier, crayfish are available from fishermen direct at certain times of the year, and you'd once again find that on the Lancelin website. There are 2 pubs. Well, there's a tavern and a hotel. A beautiful caravan park at the south end, which is relatively new and being upgraded, and then there's an older established caravan park at the north end of town. A great lookout that you should walk up and take some great selfies of the Lancelin Island. Edwards Island is at the other end of town, and we're coming up here to the entry statement on our left for Lancelin. Turn off just here. You'll see dolphins in the morning often if you're willing to walk along the beach, spend some time trying to find them. It is just a very interesting little town, a main street with a number of shops. There's a Silver Chain Medical Centre. Often we have the RAC helicopter come to rescue people who've had incidents out on the sand dunes. And this, my friends, is where we finish this section of the Turquoise Coast Drive, the turn off to Lancelin.